Hello and welcome to another edition of The Public Square, the platform where we confront the toughest questions facing our democracy, our workplaces, and our future. Today we continue our 6-part series on Botswana's labor movement with a crucial question. Where are the women? Our focus is on the role of women in trade union leadership and organizing. And we are asking why, decades into independence, women remain underrepresented at the top of union structures, despite being the backbone of many workplaces and movements. In the studio, I'm joined by Dr. Kifilwe Selema to shed light on this and other matters. Rawamgala, Dr. Selema.
Thank you very much.
Nice to have you on our show.
It's great being here.
Thank you very much, sir. The first question that I would like us to kick off with Dr. Selema is this one, that if someone were to ask me as the host of this show and says to me, Rambuya, you are discussing the role of women in trade unions as leaders and organizers. And then they say to me, but you have a gentleman in the studio. Why is it that you don't have a woman who could probably even speak more convincingly on behalf of other women?
This is a tough one, honestly, and it's quite challenging because a lot of factors are coming into play. You know, you look at the structural backgrounds of trade unions, how they came into effect or into being. You know, you look at societal expectations and societal norms, cultural practices and norms. You look at the structure itself and the kind of jobs that the men would do and the kind of jobs that women were to do from the culture. You know, many times we forget that it's not been so many years since the colonial rules and since, Difetkanis and Fetkanis, where, the men were made to go out there and fight. And from those fights, from colonial times, we brew the political spirit and political structures, And from those political structures, they were coming from the Difetani kind of, practices or wars. And then they inbuilt into our communities to say, well, the men have to go out there and fight. And then most of the time you find that it was indeed the men who went into war. And that now, spiraled out as now men were to come in and defend not just their territories, but even their families. They would go into mines, into constructions, railways, and all of that. From there, because of the different working environments, that they were faced with during, those times in Africa or Southern Africa, you would think of apartheid times, where our forefathers would go into the mines and find work and bread there. They would then come back and say, while they were there, they would formalize between themselves and have conversations about the unfairness of the job and how much they were making for the companies, what the companies were giving them. And those meetings were usually very much informal, where pubs, bars, soccer matches, Sunday football, then it aggregated to formalizing some of the trade movements. That's where they would start from, construction workers, transport people or transport guys, which was usually made. And they were mostly exclusive of the females. The female were relegated to, kitchen work, maid, the softer skill jobs, and they were not, pushed to rigorous fights or fighting jobs. That is where we borrow from to where we are. But things have since changed. We can't be at a space where now structures and cultural norms and practices. They still dictate to how we view the gender issue, or how we still believe that women are not strong leaders or they cannot lead societies. They should now be incorporated into leadership, intentionally and aggressively, radically, so that the minds of the people can change. We can't have a girl child anymore who is now, portrayed as soft, who, when they talk of their rights, they are seen as disrespectful or out of order. When I'm a gentleman, if I speak and I'm Dr. Selema and I speak in a public space in the most aggressive and radical manner, I'm more respected. But if my female counterpart does the same, the society will term this person to be disrespectful, uncultured, sometimes even get, the brand from their own family. Even their fathers may even call them and say, no, this is not how I raised you.
Not my daughter.
Yes, you're not my daughter anymore. You see, so the space needs to change. We're moving, yes, but we're moving very slowly. We need an intentional change so that we start believing that leaders, it's not about being a man or a woman. It's about, all sharing the equal responsibilities. And of course, we can't run away from the fact that, the culture of family upbringing, where you believe, or we still get much stuck into saying women are, they should raise the kids, they should be there with the kids. And at the moment, we really don't have the laws that actually protect a girl child or a woman who is in a leadership role from, balancing the scale to say, how do I raise my family? How do I go on maternity and still hold my role as a public figure or as a leader? Unless and until we have, intentional laws that permit this, and the government structures show that they are willing to allow more and more women. I mean, from the highest, lawmaking structures like the legislature, parliament. When you look at the specially elected members of parliament, you would intentionally expect, that structure to say, well, we need more female leaders, to come through. But why are they not? It is simply because, or in their case maybe, it will be that during the struggle time, when they usually say in the trenches, when they were in the trenches, you would say, where were the women? You see, if the women were there, how far away from the leadership were they? Or how far away were they from Comrade President Boko? You see, perhaps they were a bit far, maybe they were around. But what role were they allowed to play? Because again, if the woman gets too close to the president, me as their partner or I as their partner, what do I think? You see, there is that encrypted thought in these communities and societies to believe that, well, if my woman gets close to the president, it must be that, they're doing something, and it starts from there. But if it's a male, it's not an issue. They actually encourage each other and keep going. So these are the dynamics that come into play and determine the kind of leaders that we, or if we're going to really have a gender equal society at any one point. We may have as many policies that we really brew, but if the cultures, if the practices out there from, younger age is unequal itself, then you can't expect an equal society. We really pray and hope and keep, having policies even in our structures as trade unions to try and bring that equality. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's interesting. Tell me, I just want to have an idea. In terms of your membership, what is the split between men and women? 50-50, 40-60 in favor of men, in favor membership general, not leadership, just membership.
Well, most women are actually in the workspaces and formal workspaces. And actually, in the same spirit, there are also a lot of women in the informal sector spaces. You know, for us as the Federation of Bofepuso, we have a lot of women in our organization as members. But now, like you're saying, if now you talk of structures and leadership, are they there? The answer is no. There's a lot of unevenness between the general members as women and the leaders as women. Yeah, a lot of them, you find a lot of women as doctors, a lot as nurses, teachers.
Yes.
We have other private space or organizations or unions in the commercial and retail, as general private workers unions. There's a lot of women who are actually our members. Yeah.
That's good. And unfortunately, those numbers, as you rightly pointed out earlier, are not reflected in terms of representation now in the leadership.
At the top table.
At the top table.
Yes. They are truly so uneven. And it bothers a lot to say we have so many women who are supporting these movements, financially. Is it that we recruited them, because there were benefits, or we recruited them with the intention to make them the next leaders? You see, most of the time you find that they're recruited because it's CADA specific union. They're recruited, they love the products that are being offered, and sometimes because as women at the workspaces, they feel their voice is not heard, and they want someone who can actually raise their issues for them. And they are possibly not joining for themselves to raise the voice for themselves, which sometimes comes into play because you do realize and acknowledge that in many workspaces, the men will be the ones who tend to be very much vocal, suppressive, and this is a cultural issue. Women tend to be reserved, respectful. Even those women in leadership, I could imagine if I would say a woman during was the president in 2011. We had a woman president in 2011 who would have said, no, this is what I offer you. Go high.
That is during the strike.
Yes, during the 2011
civil service
strike.
2011 strike.
Exactly.
Yes.
If we had a woman president then, and that woman president said, no, I only offer you this much percentage, how would the society how the society could have reacted to that would have totally been different, But because now it was men against men, it was back to those times now where we are saying, no, if it's men against men, we got to take it down to the streets, you see. And
would you say, if it was a woman leader as president, would it have been different in a positive way or not?
It would have been different in multi ways. One, I having associated with a lot of male leaders, they would have not taken it lightly. That how is this woman saying no to us? And she's bold about it. Yes, she's presenting all the facts. But now the issue is, would the woman have broken back and look at the damage? That 2011 strike had a lot of consequences
for the economy.
Yeah, for the economy. At a personal level, people were fired.
Employees.
And you ask yourself, would the woman leader have fired the people? Or in actual fact, we wouldn't even have had the 2011 strike.
Or even have allowed it to
be
to protracted.
Exactly.
It took too long.
It took too long. So sometimes it is because of that mixture where you are like, okay, what is truly ongoing here? But now you see, I like what the president said at some point when he was saying...
The state president?
The state president, President Boko, when he was saying that we want to encourage a lot of women into leadership, but please be yourselves. Don't try to be men. What I got to understand from that was essentially he was saying, as a woman, you have your traits. You don't need to mimic a man for you to be a leader. You have to be yourself. You know, we have so many women who have led by being women, you know, by not trying to mimic anything or anyhow. And they have led very much successfully. And today you may see in other instances where maybe the woman says no, and then their no, it's taken to be like a male no. And then the fighting now erupts from there, you see. So perhaps that was the balance that he wanted to, you know, encourage all the leaders to say, look here, we have women leaders, and they are themselves, and their no is their no. And a male figure being a leader, also his no is his no. So it's a tricky one, honestly, because you have a lot, you know, it's a transitional phase where we are at, where we have to accept as a society that we are changing. Yeah. And our women as well have to be encouraged to be leaders. And it must actually start from, you know, a very young age where such platforms are available for them.
That's right.
Yeah.
Very well. Let's hold it there. If you are just joining in, you are watching The Public Square. Today, our guest is Dr. Kifilwe Selema. He is a trade union leader. We are going to take a short break. On the other side of the break, we continue our discussion.
Thulaganyo e itebagantse le merero ya babereki mo lefatsheng la Botswana lo itlisediwa ke ba Mmegile Frederick Ebert Steftan. Mo dikgwedi tse tharo tse di tlang, thulaganyo ya gago ya marakanelo e go tshetsa metseletsele ya ditlhogo tse di tla bong di sekaseka ditso le bokamoso ja makgotla a babereki mo Botswana. Dingwe tsa ditlhogo tse di akaretsa tse di latelang: inclusive economic development, seabe sa bomme mo boeteledipeleng jwa makgotla a babereki, seemo sa melao ya pereko mo Botswana, collective bargaining, policy processes, prospects and challenges to cover the practice of collective bargaining. Pele diwa ya ilelo, le wena o ka latlhela la gago, le go nyana la modisa le tlharapana, ga lenke le galala le ile kgosing. Thulaganyo e rotlediwa ke ba Frederick Ebert Steftan.
Welcome back. You are watching The Public Square. Today we are in discussion, in conversation with Dr. Kifilwe Selema, a trade unionist. And we are talking about the role of women as leaders in trade unions. This particular program is supported by Frederick Ebert Steftan. Welcome back, Dr. Selema.
Thank you very much again.
The next question that I thought we could traverse is the one relating to what trade unions are doing to create a safe and enabling environment for women leaders. What is it that you are, practical things that you are doing to assist women leaders to thrive, and even the up and coming ones, so that they can emerge? What is it that you are doing as trade unions?
You see, as trade unions from even at federation levels, we try very much to have inclusivity, where policies are designed to try and have portfolios that are gender sensitive and gender specific. Because what we had realized prior was that when you have a structure like you would have the president, the vice presidency, the secretary general, and maybe the vice, as well as the treasury, and maybe you also have publicity secretary, you know, and the labor secretary, all those. We realized then that those positions were filled with loads and loads of men. And even when, you know, you would have a female candidate, they were bulldozed out, you know, they were out-muscled during the campaign times, and most of the time they ended up, you know, losing their the elections, you know. And sometimes fairly, not that during the election process there was
Cheating or
anything, you know, that was amiss. No, the election process would have gone just okay. But, you know, when now you go down to the constituents to actually campaign, you know, you find that there may be challenges for many women, you know. Are you going to allow your partner to leave at night to go to Palape to do a campaign? Would you allow them to have a secret meeting, you know, in the middle of the bush with other team members to try and craft a strategy? You know, as partners, or their partners may not allow for that, you know. Therefore, it would contribute to how they strategized and how they go on and win elections, because those informal meetings, they're very, very strategic in campaigning, you know, where you're going to have a lot of informal meetings at sports bars, at lounges, in the middle of the night, yeah, everywhere. So the trade unions then decided to include other portfolios that were quite gender sensitive, to say, well, we need people, women, to at least occupy this one, you know. A lot of trade unions today have secretaries for gender affairs, you know, gender and women affairs, you know, that are actually, you know, supposed to be led by women, you know, and say, okay, this is your portfolio. But that is still not enough. I mean, you find that in other unions, the executive board is made of 13 people. And imagine if there is only one woman. In my union, Botswana Doctors Union, we have 7 executive positions and only 2 are women, you see. But you look at that. One is the treasurer, the other one is an additional member. You see, that is a lot of unfairness. But the CADA itself has a lot of women, you see. So now we have to shift ourselves as trade unions. And usually this kind of shift should be, you know, rooted towards the national agenda for change. You know, I believe now comes a time when leadership in the country must come together and be intentional and give women these positions on merit, because most of them, they are actually merited to get them. And not just because we want to fill positions, but because this is merited. And this can only come if, like I was saying, we are intentional and we have started earlier. You know, otherwise, if trade unions, as they are doing now, they keep encouraging women and they write in policies. It's just a policy. It's at an individual or affiliate level. But we are not seeing high-level national structures that are quite encouraging to say, are we going to produce women from grassroots, you know, leaders from grassroots? Are we having a lot of them coming through? You see, look at the political spaces. If you look at it and say, we have women's league, why don't we have men's league? You know, and then after the women's league, you have your national youth league or national executives. You know, essentially by saying, well, we have given them a women's league, we don't have to have them in the national executives. You see, by intentionally, there is a good thing, or it was done in the noblest of ideals or ideas, to say, well, if we have a women's league, we will encourage the women to actually participate, you know. But by virtue of having the women's league, we now then deny them the opportunity fairly to represent at higher levels or national structures of each union. Because we'll be like, no, we gave them the women's league. Similarly with the youth. We don't care today if we have many youth at highest level, because we say, no, we gave them the youth league. What more should they look for? You see, that alone, by segregating them, you have already now left the biggest, you know, fatty share to the male. And you know that it is not going to be easy. You know, how many women league presidents have actually won, you know, elections at even a higher level, you know, from trade unions to even our parliament? Not so many. we see a lot of them keep losing and losing, and they actually now, the Women's League are used as support tools, to actually support the male candidates, Until sometime maybe we think of saying, well, these structures that we thought we were creating to empower the women are actually the ones which are actually now disarming them. If you look at it from a different view now and say, well, we have created the Youth League, and this Youth League now is actually disarming these guys because they are unable to really participate at the highest table because they really believe that, well, I have my structure. I'll go through my structure and develop myself until I reach there, which is okay. But you're worried to say, do we have enough women at the top table? And do we really respect this Women's League? And if we have a woman in your organization occupying any office, any executive role, is it a high-end executive role? I'm yet to see, a secretary general. A secretary general in trade unions. It's a powerful role. It's the advocacy, it's the mouthpiece, it's the action portfolio is the heart and soul of the movement. Have you had any secretary general
being a woman?
Yes.
It's usually she's usually the deputy.
It's usually the deputy, if at all.
If at all, yeah.
But if we look at it, if you say who is at a higher position between the president of the Women's League or the secretary general of the party, you see, if we were to put people in a hierarchical line, in a meeting, you find that the Secretary General sits next to the president, and the Women's League president will probably be on the outer, wing of that table.
After all the members of the national executive.
Exactly. So it just shows you that, well, we have created these positions, but we have not really empowered them. And by not empowering these people or this position and not empowering these women leaders into high-end decision-making roles, we are just now putting them as pawns. And we can't be having that. I see a lot of CEOs, a lot of directors as women.
Yeah.
But they are not truly empowered to make decisions. Their decisions represent someone else, whether they are the directorates, the directors at the DPSMs, the PSPs. You start to believe that, do they truly represent their decision, or they represent the decision of the male figure? You see, and what we have since noted is that, well, in most cases, they truly represent, the figurehead, which is usually a male figure. You look at even ourselves, how many, ministers for state president as females have we had? We are yet to have
all assistants.
Yes, all assistants. Have we had a vice president who is a lady? And then you look at it to say, well, if that is the case, then how are we going to empower these women? Because the Minister for State President, for example, will be looking out for, our security arms, will be looking out at the BDF, the police, the prisons, It's challenging, and there will be the head essentially of the public service, to the DPSM director.
It's a powerful
it's a very powerful office. But we still believe that powerful office should and only be led led by the male figure. Of course, we have made some great strides, honestly.
Yeah.
But the greatest strides that we have always made is always, in most cases, deputies. We have only had Mem Manasha as the speaker, and she was
very good.
She was very good, and she was actually Madam Speaker. And
she's probably the best speaker we have ever had.
One of the best, if not the best, honestly.
Yeah.
So it does show you then that we do have women who are very strong, who have their own strength, and they will lead like women. and they are not apologetic, and the society begins to really understand that women can be as powerful and as effective leaders as their male counterparts.
That's right.
Yeah.
Very good. So we'll hold it there.
Yeah.
You are watching The Public Square. Today, we are in conversation with Dr. Kifilwe Selema, a known trade unionist here in Botswana. When we come back after the break, we are going to continue our conversation. This program is in partnership with Frederick Ebert Steftan. See you when we come back.
Thulaganyo e itebagantse le meraro ya bereki mo lefatsheng la Botswana lo itlisediwa ke ba mmegile Frederick Ebert Steftan. Mo dikgwedi tse tharo tse di tlang, thulaganyo ya gago ya marakanelo e go tshetsa metseletsele ya ditlhogo tse di tla bong di sekaseka ditso le bokamoso ja makgotla a babereki mo Botswana. Dingwe tsa ditlhogo tse di akaretsa tse di latelang: inclusive economic development, seabe sa bomme mo boeteledipeleng jwa makgotla a babereki, seemo sa melao ya pereko mo Botswana, collective bargaining, policy processes, prospects and challenges to cover the practice of collective bargaining. Pele diwa ya ilelo le wena o ka latlhela la gago le go nyana la modisa le tlharapana ga lenke le galala le ile kgosing. Thulaganyo e rotloediwa ke ba Frederick Ebert Steftan.
If you are just joining in, you are watching The Public Square. Today, we are discussing the topic, the role of women leadership in trade unions. We are in conversation with Dr. Kifilwe Selema, who is a trade unionist himself. He's actually one of our famous trade union leaders in Botswana. He's right here in the studio today, and we are in conversation with him regarding that particular topic. Women, the role that women play as leaders and organizers in trade unions. Thank you very much again, Selema. We are very privileged and honored to have you in the studio. As I was listening to you, I was saying to myself, being a doctor, you are actually in the health sector, a sector which is, in terms of workers, is predominantly women. Nurses, most of them are women. I think even doctors. I'm speaking under correction, but I know we have a lot of women doctors in our country. You can even talk of even radiographers, lab technicians, and this. Most of them are women. But you look at the leadership, again, it's dominated by
the male figures.
By the male figures.
Yeah.
I know you have explained eloquently what the problem is. I just want you to use that particular example of your sector, just to illustrate this point that you were making.
Yeah. For our sector, the challenging aspect is always going to be, medicine itself, because it's a new, I would say, sector for Botswana. There are all sectors in the country. These sectors like transport, logistics, construction. Those are old sectors. The health sector, though it is primitive and old enough, it has not been well represented at the highest level in terms of negotiation table. So hence you realize the nurses union is relatively a new union, and of course the Botswana Doctors Union is very much a fresh union from 2019. So when then you have a new union, the first things that actually come to mind is, let us be combative of the issues that we have always been talking to. instead of, mostly having that social dialogue, people are actually angry and they've been, carrying this anger for many years because they believe and know that they have been misrepresented at the highest table, and actually sometimes not even misrepresented, not even represented. Their issues have been shoved under the desk. So in that space then, you usually have now people who are angry, people who are combative, people who are very much resolute and radical without fear to say, this is what we demand and this is how we demand it. And they are not wrong. And in that space, it's usually challenging to find the women, who do come up and say, well, let us be as radical. They are there, but they are far in between. We have had so many of them even in our space. But it was mostly the men, because of the anger, the testosterone would have led the most men to say, let us go to combat, and that has been the shape that then took the leadership or the executive to say, who is more combative to take our issues now to the relevant people? And then people would choose the most combative and the most apprehensive person who's given to really represent their issues with the radicalism that they would have anticipated. But you know what? In the next few years, as our societies change and develop, you would now expect that these people's issues are now well represented, they are well known, and solutions have already been crafted. Now we are going to enter a space now where we are doing what? Where now we are coming up with conversations. And who is the best person to have conversations? I mean, we know women can go to the river and converse the whole day while doing laundry, talking about this and that. So now, when now that time comes, where now we are now having a true social dialogue, because we are not really having a social dialogue at the moment as trade unions and the government or the employer parties. We are still at combat because we believe they are not understanding where we are supposed to be. They are not conforming to international labor standards. They are not respectful of the collective labor agreements that are signed. Now, when we reach a level where now we fully comply, the government complies, or the employer party complies to international labor standards and practices, it now complies to, advanced working conditions, and actually even proposes them before the union proposes it. Then the male figure may now have a reduced role, because the male figure is always combative of facts or issues. Now it has to be social dialogue, the female leaders are going to come up with now solutions, because the solutions they're coming up with now, they are the solutions for the future. They will say, okay, let us sit with them, let us hear them. But now, because we, between the employer party and the unions, we are not at a level where we are advanced enough to talk and resolve things by just talking within days. We still believe that, no, there can be, a way to avert them. We are not yet ready to say, but we need this law, and this law is progressive. Let's effect it today and actually do it today. We would say, okay, this law is effective, and then we effect it after 2 years. You see, during that time, there is combat, and the combat people are usually the male figures. But like I'm saying, in 5-10 years' time, we are going to have more leaders from the female gender coming up, because now, the role of combat will be diminished by the agility of the parties to move quickly to closing on collective bargaining agreements and to also standardize the practices. That is why in other countries, really, you have a lot of women coming up as leaders, because, there is no more combat. It's time for solutions. It's out there to say, okay, what can we do? And then society, contributes to the solutions. And now the leader takes now the solutions. That is why even words like chairman is being now deleted from the history books to come in and say chairperson, you know, because now we are trying to be as neutral because we are getting more and more advanced. But we do believe, say, that, you know, with time, as the social dialogue aspect is seen as a, you know, conflict resolution mechanism, because we are not seeing it as a conflict resolution mechanism. We still think of social dialogue as, well, we're just talking. But it's actually a conflict resolution mechanism that we should be implementing, that other advanced countries are using. They sit around the table, you bring the issue, and then within, you know, days or even hours, they've brought in solutions. And then we sign the solutions. But here, we still, you know,
combat
have
stage.
combat stage. We have to go out on the radios. We have to call people by name. We have to, you know,
Demonstrations.
demonstrate, you know, sometimes unnecessary, you know. Yeah.
That's good. That is interesting. Have you, as unions, ever considered having a quota system for women in union leadership? And if not, what alternative solutions exist to empower, affirm them? I know earlier you said unions have since created certain portfolios like gender this and that, and normally they are reserved for women. But in terms of a quota to say, okay, if there are 7 members of the national executive, it's going to be 4-3 or something in favor of any of the genders. It cannot be
7 male,
7
7
and
female,
1 female or something, or 7 female and 1 male.
Most of us, or most of the trade unions, we have not really reached that stage. You know, even if some may be, you know, seated at the boardrooms and postulating it, trying to implement it, it'll just be policy, you know, because you would realize what really plays behind doors to say, but what is making the male come up like that? You know, you find that most of the women, they're really sabotaged in many ways, you know, from underreporting of certain harassments, sometimes even sexual, even in trade unions, you know, and that plays a big role in terms of how many can come forward. You know, the verbal aspect of talking. Do we really filter ourselves when we talk to them? Do we really encourage them to come forward? So even if we are to say, well, 40-60 in favor of male to be 60, it will just be policy. And even if we were to give the women that 40%, are we really ready as trade unionists to respect the portfolio of that woman and empower the portfolio of that woman and ensure that this portfolio actually thrives? You know, we have had many years, many women. We know that at Botswana Public Employees Union, which is Bupeu, we have had Mama Khwera as the president for many years. And she fought many battles. And
she was a fighter.
Yeah, she was a fighter. You know, it does then show you that we do have a lot of women. Of course, when it comes to other portfolios, like in government, where we see a lot of permanent secretaries as female, people always say, the male figure out there put the women in this position so he can control them. You see, so that one is always, you know, debatable. But now when you have...
It's cynical, actually.
Yeah, exactly. So, but now when you have a women president from a trade union as big as Bupeu, it does show and it does, you know, demonstrate that we do have capable, strong women who can stand the test of time and any internal politics, and they go to court, still come out victorious, many ways, you know. So that alone should be showing us that we have capable people out there. All that is needed is we really need to empower them. And of course, you would know that Manual Workers CEO is a female. you know, Me Botsalano. And she's been there for many years.
Yes, yes.
You know, it's only that maybe people would know Ramotshwara Kgole more. But
He's a towering figure.
yeah, because
Manual workers.
I mean, if not just in manual workers, I mean, if even I stand next to Ramotshwara Kgole,
Yes, yes.
it will always appear I'm a small boy.
I get it.
You know, he's a towering figure of trade unionism. He come from afar. But we do realize then that there are many women in the trade space that should actually come up more, and we should actually encourage more. But my worry is, are we going to effect, you know, their roles? Are we going to empower them to say, well, you are the leader, your decision is final, let's go ahead and make that decision? Or we are putting them as figuratives and figures there. But in trade unionism, I do believe that when a woman is up there, because of the nature of the trade union movement, they are then empowered by the Constitution to make the changes and the rules and whatever that supports their role, you see. But in terms of us now having a quota, I don't see that happening anytime soon. You know, I think we are still at a combative stage where even themselves, maybe women, they believe then that, wow, this is too messy for them at this stage. You know, for them to have, you know, their phone tabbed,
That's
you know,
right.
movement tracked, you know, because it's still combat, you know, and maybe they may feel they are not representing the members because the members may expect a combative nature, and maybe the female figure does not want that route by nature of how women usually want to lead. So they are totally different ways. Men will always be combative in many ways, you know, apprehensive and fight things head on. And women do fight things head on, but they are more conservative, and they usually look out more to say, but we can't burn the house. You know, we can't destroy the road.
That's right.
You know, my kids or our kids are going to this school. But for male, they can burn the whole village, you know.
And have nowhere to live.
And have nowhere to live. And I will still say, yeah, well, I can still have a baby at 90 years. You see, so maybe the nature of male figures is always like that.
That's right.
For the female, they're really a national builder. If we could invest more in them, in their leadership, you know, and empower the leadership, the roles that they actually sit on, empower it, not to put them there and then we still have a towering figure overlooking them and informing and instructing them on how to execute their roles. Yeah.
That's right. Thank you very much, Dr. Selema. Really appreciated that. Tonight's conversation has reminded us that gender equality in the labor movement is not just a women's issue. It's a question of justice, democracy, and transformation. From quotas to culture change, and from boardrooms to grassroots, the fight for inclusion is being led and lived by women across Botswana. A big thank you to our guest, Dr. Selema. We really appreciated your input, Dr. Selema. We also thank our partners at Frederick Ebert Stiftung for supporting this important series. Join us next week for the next show as we continue unpacking the future of Botswana's trade unions. Until then, stay bold, stay informed, and keep the conversation alive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.